So, we're going to pick up in our notes with assessing intelligence. Which I've already talked to you a little bit, but I want to give you a background on some of the people who started the intelligence testing. So the first guys that you have are going to be Alfred Binet, which we talked about him, I believe, was it Wednesday? Yes. I believe we talked about him on Wednesday. He's going to deal with the concept of mental age, which is a measurement of intelligence, performance. He's going to be the French guy who thinks of this idea of measuring the intelligence performance. And so he has this concept of mental age. Then you have Louis Terman, which is going to be a Stanford professor, so he's American. He's going to bring the test to the U.S. and create the Stanford Binet intelligence testing. Now, intelligence quotient, which is IQ, is going to be defined originally as IQ is going to equal your mental age and your calculated age times 100, or your current age, and the average score is 100. Now, there's going to be some principles that deal with the constructing of tests. First of all, this is an IQ normal curve, and because Ms. Cannon's in Keynote, she can't use her mouse, but if you take your eyes to the right, you can see that the middle average score is 100. On the right end of the spectrum, it goes to 160, and then it caps off at the end at 140. So you can see like that bell curve of like average or like peak IQ, and then it rolls down. And then this is dealing with population, and on the side you can see standard deviations, Wechsler scale, Stanford Binet, and then the cumulative percent of all the tests. Standardization is going to deal with standard test protocol, testing the same things across the board. You have a normal curve, which is shown in this, like this bell curve is shown here. And that is like, a normal curve is like dealing with, you have like lower, average, middle ground, and then higher upper people. It forms a normal curve. Reliability is how reliable is the test and the items on there. Validity is the test actually testing what it is meant to test. So it's just like if Ms. Cannon makes a psychology test and I give you all these questions for research methods when I just taught you thinking language and intelligence. That's not testing you on what I just recently taught you or what you know. Validity is like when an item is evaluating what it's meant to evaluate. There's content validity, and then there's predictive validity. So content validity is dealing with how much you know. Predictive validity is if you can evaluate or fill in the blanks. Not fill in the blank like as in fill in the blank on a test, but if you can conclude or take it from there, take it to a higher level of thinking. Modern intelligence tests, you have the aptitude tests. They're designed to predict future performance, and achievement tests are designed to assess what has been learned. So you have the SAT and then AP Psychology, okay? SAT is going to deal with future performance. AP Psychology is showing you, like if you took the AP exam, let's say you take AP Psych, that is to evaluate how much you've learned. The Wechsler's Adult Intelligence Scale, which is WIAS, it contains verbal and nonverbal performance subsections. Also, it contains an overall score as well as an individual score on the subsections. The Which in Children, which is the Wechsler's Intelligence Scale for Children, it can also, they administer the test for children to test ADHD and things like that. And I believe we looked both of these up the other day and talked about them further. The big question is stability over change. Does intelligence remain the same over the lifespan, or does it change as we develop? Which is the concept of fluid and crystallized intelligence. Crystallized is the intelligence that you maintain over time. Fluid is you gather it, you gain it, or you can like lose it over time. The Flynn effect is a phenomenon of increasing IQ over the past centuries, which I gave you an article yesterday about the Flynn effect, and your substitute should have given you a question sheet. If she didn't, please make sure she gives that to you so you can complete it. What are some factors that you think could contribute to the Flynn effect? I just want you to think about it. when we talk about the Flynn effect, it shows that the intelligence test scores have been performing higher in over the last few centuries or decades, as you can see from like 1910 and up to 1990. Well, a couple of factors: television, internet, publication of books, people having literacy in their life. There's a lot of, especially if you talk about Gardner's intelligences, a lot of those intelligences, some of it has some learned traits to it. That's the big argument too with Gardner's intelligence, is that some of the categories are skills. Differences in intelligence. You have high and low extremes. So the average score on an IQ test is 100. 50% of people in the U.S. are between 90 and 110. 95 are between 70 and 130. If you are below 70 in IQ, then you have intellectual disabilities. Developmentally, they can be delayed. Above 130, you are considered gifted in our society. Remember we talked about Mensa the other day, and I left you a Mensa test, and I don't know if the sub gave it to you, but there's a Mensa test, and people are part of this society, and they're considered the geniuses in our society. Here's a normal bell curve right here. As you can see, I told you that there's lower, then you have like those average, middle ground people, and then you have the uppers, which would be considered or categorized as gifted. Now, when we talk about intellectual disabilities, there are some requirements. If you have an IQ of 70 or below, there will be some immature adaptive behaviors. First of all, it'll happen intellectually, socially, and practically. And the symptoms appear before about 18 months. And you can look right here, this picture. Now, when we talk about giftedness, it is the concept that you can possess outstanding talent or to show the potential for performing at high levels when compared with others of the same age. So children who are labeled as gifted are those children who are they got some intelligence, they're just a little bit above the crowd. Okay, it's kind of like when you're running a 5K and there's always that person who by the time you've left the starting line, they're already around the curve and get ready to hit the bin, and you're not going to see them. They're just a little bit ahead, and there will always be that group that's behind them of like 50 or 60 people who are running at the same pace, and then you'll have a couple people who are falling behind. And that's kind of how IQ works. It's just like a race, and there's always those people who are conditioned and trained to run, and they just go. There are people who all stick together in a group of 50 and 60 and run around the same pace. And then there are a couple people who are way farther behind and will finish the race, but just a little bit later than everybody else. That's what I kind of compare it to. I think it makes it a little bit better to understand. And that is my last slide for intelligence. I'm going to talk to you for about maybe 5 minutes about language. So language is you want to think about how thought and language interact, okay? Because you say your thoughts. A lot of you say them a lot in class. What is language? Our language is our spoken, written, and signed words, okay? It is the way we combine them to communicate a meaning. So language is written, spoken words, signed words, they're words. But all about connecting it, the somatic aspect where you're connecting the meaning to these words, okay? Because you can know a whole bunch of words, but if you can't tie them together to form a meaning, it doesn't mean anything. That's kind of corny, but you know what I meant. Okay, moving on. 2 questions to ponder. Does communication require language? First question. Second of all, in humans, does thinking require language? I want you to think about it for a second. All right, all languages will contain homonyms, which are the smallest units of sound in a language. English has about 44 homonyms. Okay, how many homonyms does platypus have? Morphonems, which deal with the smallest unit of meaningful sound. It can also be parts of words like prefixes or suffixes, like ed at the end. At the end of a word means past tense, okay? Now, grammar. Grammar is the rules of language, okay? How many of you have heard grammar in English class and just annoyed you and irritated you? Okay, grammar is the rules of a language. Syntax is the order of the words in a language. I know if you've taken English class, you have heard the word syntax. Also, semantics is the set of rules by which we derive meaning from language. Semantics is, this is not the first time you've heard this word. It means meaning. So these three form, grammar is the rules, syntax is the order, semantics is the meaning. Is this the White House or the House White? Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a certain order in which you put things. This is the White House. Okay. Moving on. Language acquisition. When we talk about language acquisition, it's the stages that we learn language. There's the babbling stage, one-word stage, two-word stage. We talked about this with development, which is dealing with telegraphic speech. And then after the telegraphic speech stage, we get overgeneralization. So it's dealing with babies, okay? Here's a summary of language development. Here's the month approximation. So 4 months babies may babble. They babble many speech sounds. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. At 10 months, babbling reveals household language. 12 months, one-word stage. 24, 2 words, telegraphic speech. Kind of like a telegraph. That's what I think about. Like, and if you ever know about old school telegraphs, they're like, call or see right away or help, something's happened. It's very like short. They may be missing words, but they're trying to form those sentences and the concepts. And 24 months and beyond, which is 2 years old, is language develops rapidly into complete sentences. Ms. Cannon has already told you that at 2 years old, I was sitting in doctor's offices holding whole conversations with people because when we talk about language development, what we're going to talk about in a little bit is that you learn it from your parents. My mom loved to talk. So how do we learn language? I segued. Did you see that? English, you can learn Chinese, Spanish, Italian. Social learning theory is going to be B.F. Skinner, and he is from the Behavior School. I think you've already realized B.F. Skinner is big on behaviorism. Babies may imitate a parent, okay? I told you about how my dad said a cuss word and my sister mimicked it because that's how she learned. So social learning theory, and you've heard social learning theory before with development, is that babies imitate their parents. And then if they are reinforced, they keep saying the word. My sister stopped saying that word because my mom lit her butt up. But there are other words like I need to go potty or potty that my mother embraced because potty means I need to go potty. Let's get the baby on potty. If they are punished, they will stop saying the word. That's why when you were a little kid, you didn't say cuss words because your mommy was like, I'll put soap in your mouth. Okay. Anyway, when we talk about Chomsky, Chomsky's going to have this theory of the nativist theory, and it's going to, this is Chomsky, look at him smiling, he's so happy. Anyway, he says that we learn language too quickly for it to just be brought through reinforcement and punishment. He thinks it's natural. And what you need to understand is that he's going to have this concept, I put it in bold for a reason, it's inborn universal language acquisition device. Remember that acquisition is when you put, especially like even when we're talking about conditioning, it's when you have an association, okay? Like good words get good reinforcement. Bad words get punishment. That is having an association between two stimuli. So when we talk about Chomsky, he's going to have this ideal that the nativist, it's native, like it's natural for us to have language. But things like rolling your tongue for Spanish or having an accent or a certain dialect, that is something that you learn from your parents. But he believes that language is natural regardless. But you pick up the traits of language from your parents. Also, Whorf is going to have linguistic relativity. It's the idea that language determines the way we think. The Hopi tribe has no past tense in their language. So Whorf studied them, and he says that they rarely think of the past. Okay? He has done this study. What happens if children from language are isolated from language during their critical period for language development? What's going to happen is they can master the basic words and learn to order them, but they will never become as fluent in producing and comprehending subtle grammatical differences, which discuss hands in hand with Genie, and we've learned about Genie. I'm going to pick up with Do Animals Use Language on Monday, so you just hold tight. Have a good day. Make sure you can forward and rewind, and make sure you write all of these notes.